The DRUID Code: Magic, Megaliths and Mythology by Thomas Sheridan. Chapter 1, Part 1. According to one telling of the great Norse mythological epic, the world of men begins in the aftermath of the Battle of Ragnarok, in which the gods of Asgard are destroyed during an apocalyptic showdown of immense proportions. The Norse gods are doomed to the poignant fate of accepting their own rise from the devastation caused by the unleashing of seismic and supernatural forces of destruction and chaos. The gods are fated to die, and this prophetic lamentation of impending destruction, from Odin to Balder and several other gods and goddesses of the Nordic tradition, is a constant within the Norse mythological pantheon. Just as the ice giants, whom the gods themselves destroyed, likewise they, the Aether tribe of gods from Asgard, are also doomed to die. Ragnarok has and continues to conjure up endless visions of bedlam and chaos within the imagination of people long after the end of Viking Age. A powerful narrative which continues to grow in popularity right up to the present day. It is generally forgotten, though, that the story of Ragnarok is in actuality a powerful restoration myth, albeit one that comes with a price. That price being the loss of certain powerful crafts and magical abilities which were once the exclusive possession of the pre-Ragnarok races and beings. The mayhem and destruction is the not final outcome by any means. Life, and even the gods and goddesses, in somewhat lesser forms, begin again. It is their magic, crafts, and supernatural powers that are lost, or at least are no longer mentioned, or have taken second place in being central to the Nordic identity. The concept of cataclysmic floods, either submerging or unleashing monsters before a new age of restoration and human social spiritual rejuvenation, is a common thread within European folklore. The Swiss psychoanalyst Carl Jung believed the deep waters of the seas represented the personal and the collective unconscious. By the seashore, the sea breaks into the land, flooding everything. The sea is a symbol of the collective unconscious because unfathomed depths lie concealed beneath its reflecting surface. The sea is a favorite place for the birth of visions, invasions by unconscious contents. A similar motif appears within the telling of the Irish mythological classic The Children of Lir, when the old world of magic and the supernatural are slowly tormented into oblivion by 900 years of a cruel, watery fate as the result of a wicked curse, which ends in an Arland where the old heathen ways and sacred places have vanished into the stuff of lore. This is an idea which is common in many magical traditions, the concept of making corporeal and incorporeal sacrifices in order to exchange one set of powers for another. Sometimes the sacrifice is in the form of racial memory, tradition, or trauma preserved within the subconscious of the tribe as an allegory-filled fairy tale or mythology. A votive hoard represents a powerful example of a ritual burial of gold and other treasures so as to acquire the blessings of the gods. This can also extend to spiritual, cultural, and even psychological sacrifices to the future gods in the guise of an older way of living and worship being buried within the culture of a society as a kind of votive hoard of the subconscious mind of the tribe. In many ways, this is the most powerful votive hoard of all, as it exists not buried in an obscure field somewhere, but rather it is buried or charged into the psyche of every member of the tribe, waiting to be restored within the collective consciousness of the whole. The Golden Grimoire of the Broita Hoard. In 1896, the Broita Hoard was found in a field adjacent to Loch Foyle in County Derry, Ireland, now Northern Ireland, which included the ritual burial of a delicate golden boat as a gift to the Irish and Manx sea god Manannán mac Lir. The initial finding of the Broita hoard resulted in a major diplomatic to and fro between Dublin and London as to which of their respective national museums would keep this stunningly beautiful artifact. In the end, Dublin won, and the Broita hoard now sits in the National Museum of Ireland. However, it was the sensation and diplomatic tensions surrounding the ownership of the Golden Boat, creating something of a psychic charge, which unearthed the most powerful treasure of all, the return to the public consciousness of an old pre-Christian god. The Broita hoard had performed its main task when the Druids buried it on the shores of Lough Foyle thousands of years previously. Manannán mac Lir was once again the pagan sea god of the Gaels. Both the stories of Ragnarok and the Children of Lir have two very significant commonalities: the transition or painfully traumatic transformation of one version of reality into another, by acts of fate and or wickedness, ultimately involving an unleashing of the power of water along with temporary submergence, and in both cases, Christian scribes wrote down these tales having broken the long line of the previous orally transmitted traditions from which they came, at which point some creative editing placed biblical entities and timelines into the native mythology as if to imply, somehow, that the shift to Christianity was in and of itself a traumatic event which required tapping into the same mythological traditions of traumatic transformation and eventual restoration which produced earlier disaster and survival myths. Ragnarok itself is a series of future, or possibly cyclical, events which culminate in an enormous battle in which many of the supreme deities of Norse mythological pantheon are killed, including Odin, Thor, and Loki, along with many humans who are destroyed upon the plain of Vigrid, the place of the Search. The descriptions of the actual battle of Ragnarok within the Norse Eddas tell of fire giants burning bridges to cinders, giant serpents splashing toxic liquids upon opposing armies, along with several mentions of weather warfare, including mighty winds and targeted tidal waves. Such is the fury of the battle, along with the other turbulent events surrounding Ragnarok, that it allows Fenrir the giant wolf to break forth from his cage, and then, following his death by Odin's vengeful son, all the other giant beasts tear one another asunder until the entire world sinks to the bottom of the sea among waters that have been turned into a boiling cauldron by the intensity of the battle. In the mythological aftermath of the Battle of Ragnarok, the world eventually floats back up from the depths to be reborn and renewed as a fertile land of new opportunity and tranquility. The gods who survived the chaos of Ragnarok then hold a council and decide to repopulate the earth with a male and female human who have both managed to survive, along with the lesser gods who were not killed in the cataclysm. These two people will find shelter in the still-standing Yggdrasil world tree under the protection of Odin's sons, Vidar and Vali, and their uncle Honir, along with Thor's sons, MoZzy and Magni, who still retain possession of their father's hammer, Mjolnir. These gods then immigrate to the unscorched land of Idavol, the fields of fertility. A new world will then be constructed, and the age of man shall begin in earnest. The Mystery of Damata. The Irish mythological tradition, on the other hand, has not revealed any such creation apocalyptic myths to date. The legends speak of waves of successive invasions from across the sea, who changed the nature of Ireland with every new culture that arrived. This could also denote a shift in consciousness as much as real races from other countries invading air. However, there is one extremely tantalizing mention of an entity referred to as Damata, which, according to the translation by Lady Gregory, was a four-headed, many-legged, sea turtle-like creature, and the idea of this being an Irish creation myth has been recently brought back into focus by Anthony Murphy of the Mythical Ireland website. And the valley of Damata was there, the sea turtle that could suck down a man in armor. Damata is eventually slain by the Dagda, the good god, and the stone of Ben was then erected on the spot where the monster was cut down, somewhere in the Bruna-Bonnier area around New Grange. The location of the Valley of Mata itself has still not been fully determined, although this valley may well be an allegorical idea as much as a real place. As we shall see with the Midgard serpent of Norse mythology later on in the text, the most incredibly startling synchronicities exist between tangible reality and mythology that goes way beyond the concept of coincidence. The reading and understanding of the Irish mythological record in terms of it being something of a psychological archive of the Irish ancient psyche has been generally lacking. This is unfortunate, as such an approach can reveal more about the lives of the ancient Irish than by just merely looking for proof that the individuals mentioned in the text might be based on real historical figures, which itself is still plausible. The Mata story would appear to be far more significant in terms of its meaning than the attention it has been given to date. The concept that some monsters from the deep emerging to be slain by the good god harkens towards an almost Lovecraftian concept of subconscious fears bubbling up from the depths of the psychic abyss. These are the dangers that inevitably come with a shift in consciousness, either personally or collectively. Even the term Mata itself speaks of a primordial linguistic archetype, as in the mother aspect of the initial maternal godhead. The Ma sound is a universal constant within early human language and may well be a linguistic version of a neurological form constant, phosphen, in that it is derived from inside the human mind, independently without an external source, similar to how basic shapes such as spirals and crosses are generated deep inside the brains of people who are kept in absolute darkness for long periods of time. The process is still unexplained by neuroscience, although it can be induced by the triggering of electrical or magnetic stimulation of the retina or visual cortex, and the effect is also known as the prisoner's cinema. The same archetypal shapes are also experienced by people using psychedelic substances. The phrase seeing stars also comes from this experience. The term for mother sounds very similar all over the world in dozens of unconnected linguistic traditions, and may well be the term that came to denote measurement and calendric cycles based on the human female menstrual cycle. Ma, matter, mother, parameter, and so on. Women kept out of sunlight for long periods of time stopped menstruating, and perhaps this was even discovered by our ancient ancestors. Did these women, while sequestered inside a cave, passage cairn, or long barrow, also speak of tales surrounding magical dancing spirals and other shapes eventually appearing in the darkness around them? Imagine the psychological effect of these tales recounted by women and how it would have impacted upon the entire tribe when their experiences were told. The witches had arrived, only for the men to then also spend time inside these wombs or absolute darkness to witness the same dancing shapes and forms appearing within their own minds. The magicians had arrived. Are some of the shapes we see carved inside Irish passage chambers from Note to New Grange to Low Crew the artistic representations of neurologically generated phosphins beheld by our ancestors while in their magical state of absolute darkness? When a culture develops not only an understanding of the menstrual cycle itself, along with its relationship to the moon, and coupled with this, the ability to stop menstruation in places of darkness, among the triggering of dancing forms and shapes within the visual void of the environment, then we have the beginning of ritual magic. The female cycle then becomes the sacred scale of measurement which can be predicted and controlled according to its direct relationship to the cosmos. The ancient MoZzy, through their Mata magic, could create or prevent the creation of life by their art, caves, underground chambers, and signs, lunar and menstrual cycles, in accordance with their will, birth control, in order to change consciousness, phosphins. The basic fundamentals of ritual magic are born. We also can't discount that the monster nature of the Mata was a much later degradation process, similar to how Christians also changed Luke to leprechaun. The four-headed aspect of the Mata is numerically also highly significant within the overall Irish mythological pantheon. The very idea that the ancient Irish based their early cycles on the menstrual lunar effect would have been represented as an affront to the imported religion of the Middle East when one considered their own attitude towards women and the menstrual cycle. The curse was born. Therefore, we have to consider that the possibility that the universal mother of the Irish, the Mata, was transformed by Christian scribes into a monster from the deep which had to be slain and be replaced with a psychophallus in the form of a standing stone. Again, this example serves to demonstrate that we cannot always take the translations of Irish mythology as honest, uneditorialized accounts. What was hidden or changed by early Christian monks tell us a great deal indeed if we read between the lines. Such editorialization may also have been compromises created or rather altered by Druids within the early Irish Church to keep on the good side of Rome by not appearing to be too nostalgic for the old gods. The Mata story presents us with a humbling indication of just what an immense task deciphering the Druid code is and always will be. Perhaps the most northerly megalithic stone circle in Europe is the Domsteinane site in western Norway near the city of Sola. Looking more akin to a magical symbol laid out in stone than a traditional Neolithic stone circle, the complex suggests a more ritualistic arrangement when compared to the stone circles we see in Britain and Ireland. However, Domsteinane may actually be a better preserved complex than, say, Beltany Circle in County Donegal, Ireland, which contains large numbers of random and scattered smaller stones within a circle, and which may have been laid out originally in a more segmented geometric design. As Domsteinane currently remains a mystery as to its actual antiquity, we can only speculate upon its original purpose. In 1822, the Swedish archaeologist and folklorist Niels Henrik Holborg theorized that it was a royal chamber with the king seated on the throne at the center. However, this is unlikely as such a scenario is more commonly applied to ritual magic circles, whereby the Magi or elder priest is the focal point of energetic focus and protection during the performance of the ritual. Domsteinane suggests a highly developed degree of sophistication and cultural elegance by its original builders. Britain's Atlantis. At the time of the publication of this book, there was a growing interest and awareness among the general public of the once huge areas of land which once had connected Ireland and Britain to mainland Europe, along with the now submerged vast regions of the western Mediterranean, where islands such as Malta were once tall mountains which stood in the middle of fertile plains protected by the Straits of Gibraltar, which acted as a giant natural dam holding the remorseless power of the Atlantic Ocean at bay. The nearby island of Sicily was likewise a tall mountainous region covering a much more expansive landmass than is the case at present. In recent times, what appears to be a large menhir standing stone, with distinct signs of having been worked by humans, was discovered 60 kilometers off the coast of Sicily, which is part of the overall European megalithic arc from Malta, Sicily to Scandinavia. The menhir is located at 40 meters, over 100 feet, below the surface on a now submerged island known as Pantelleria Vecchia. I predict that more menhirs, dolmens, and other man-made megalithic structures will be discovered on the seabed, specifically from Orkney to Malta, including the most likely place of the surge itself, Doggerland, in the years to come. Effectively, if one chose to do so, and perhaps as recently as 5,000 to 8,000 years ago, a healthy person could walk all the way from Norway across the presently submerged Doggerland onto Britain and Ireland, continue south to Brittany, around the western coast of Iberia, and across into Malta, perhaps without needing to make a single sea journey. Or at the very most, perhaps only a short crossing by boat. In effect, the landmass of Western and Southern Europe currently available for human habitation is significantly smaller today than what was habitable during the age of the megalith builders before 2500 BC and earlier. One can only imagine how the social, cultural, and psychological impact this loss of land must have affected the humans who once lived there, especially if the rise in sea level was more sudden and catastrophic than is presently accepted. Such an event would have left a profound and lasting legacy upon the psyche of the people who survived as well as that of later generations. Regions of Western Europe which became submerged leading up to and during the loss of Doggerland, the entire black region of this map represents a conservative approximation of the total amount of land once available for human habitation and settlement. The complexity of the human societies which settled in these now submerged regions are to date unknown. However, recent discoveries of submerged structures found off the coast of Orkney, along with the famous Seahand site of Norfolk, England, give tantalizing insights of what is yet to be found under the sea further out from the present coastline. This Doggerland landmass, now beneath the North Sea, has long been known to fishermen who would occasionally pull up mammoth tusks and large deer anthens while trolling the seabed. No serious investigation has yet been undertaken to locate any possible megaliths which may be located within the black regions of this map. In allegorical terms, the Battle of Ragnarok fits in well within this initial European climatic catastrophe, as does the numerous surviving tales from around Western and Southern Europe which speak of lands and ancestors doomed to be imprisoned under the seas as a result of some apocalyptic event. If the Epic of Ragnarok were to be the only apocalyptic legend to survive, that would be a coincidence. As there are many others which bear the same narrative, albeit using different gods and monsters to describe similar events, we are then dealing with a detective story, a code to be unraveled in the form of comparative mythological archetypes and distinct narratives which are brought into manifestation when reciting them within the repository of one's own subconscious mind among the ancient stone ruins and megalithic sites. The evidence of both tangible and psychological, and only a polymath-like approach from the great polymaths, having learned much or gathering evidence from several disciplines, so a body of cohesive evidence can reveal a more complete picture, will present us with a plausible, if not wonderfully liberating and exciting presentation. a lost and very distinct society which represented a highly developed culture spanning most of Western Europe and which was destroyed, and perhaps not for the first time, in a monumental event somewhere around 2500 BC. The rise and loss of the civilization thus became the lore of Ragnarok and the children of Lear, along with the stories of the lost lands and races from High Brazil to Tirnanok and even Plato's Atlantis. These events were so traumatic to the peoples who survived them that they sequestered them within a compensatory mythology, and this was then passed down from generation to generation by various priest classes to the ordinary people who heard them and who kept the stories alive until the arrival of Christianity. This represented an ongoing development of magic and the occult, being entrusted to an elite class of select individuals who were the primary guardians of the message. Following the arrival of the new faith from the Middle East by way of Babylon and Rome, along with it came the mandate to create a consensus which stated that the development of the Occidental was an exclusive byproduct of spiritual, agricultural, technological, and social engineering innovations which arose originally in the Middle East sometime during the Bronze Age. The Temple of Gigantea, Giant's Tower on the island of Gozo, giving this name due to the colossal boulders stacked neatly upon its huge walls. The building is clearly from a time of great antiquity if the weathering of the stones is compared to a nearby Roman aqueduct. Maltese folklore states that the islands of Malta and Gozo were inhabited by a race of giants before the first people arrived from Sicily. This mythology is common with other European tales of giants in that the new arrivals deceive, murder, rob, starve the giants out of existence. Why are these folktales so common and so similar, while also being often intrinsically connected to the megalithic structures of particular regions? Why have these legends of giants been kept alive over the centuries? Eventually, this Sumerian trajectory humanized the savages of the West and North with the coming of the Roman Empire and then later Christianity. In time, this east-to-west migration theory became the origin of all European societies, ethnic groups, and cultures, and it has remained steadfast ever since. There can be no escaping the fact that all Indo-European historical research, along with linguistic, cultural, and genetic investigations, have only one agenda, and that is to copper-fasten the out-of-Babylon consensus. All the other contradictory data and anomalies are dismissed, ridiculed, and ignored by the academics. Yet there still remains profound linguistic, archaeological, and other large-scale cultural and startlingly puzzling anomalies which fly in the face of this almost dogmatic theory. The sigils on the stones, the message in the mind. Why is it that the complexity of Neolithic structures on the fringes of Europe, such as the Brune-Bonnier region in Ireland and at Orkney to the north of Scotland, portray a degree of artistic and design complexity which is often superior to anything on mainland Europe from the same historic era? Sites such as Noath and Skara Brae suggest being at the center of a culture rather than one lost on the extreme margins of a civilization. The level of design at both locations is significant, and with most of the other major megalithic sites in Ireland and Britain, they tell us much about the kind of people who lived there in Neolithic times. In 1980, the maverick Irish megalithic rock art and astroalignment pioneers Martin Brennan and Jack Roberts, both artists, incidentally identified that on August the 1st, the setting sun rested on the backstone of Cairn F at the Loughcrew complex, where the Neolithic artists, had carved a circle with radial lines and a crescent. The sunset at that time of year had effectively been sigilized by the ancient artists who used the setting sun on a specific date to charge the symbol, thereby not only infusing it with a practical connection between earth, sun, and the cycles of the season, but also applying abstractive and quantitative attributes to the simplicity of the symbol itself. This was a sigil, a magical symbol or seal, and not just a simple drawing, locating the fall of light from the sun on a particular day of the year. Neolithic people understood the power of their own emerging conscious minds through this magic. They knew how to get inside their own heads. This represents a quantum leap in human understanding and a million miles away from the stereotype of grunting, knuckle-scraping primitives that is generally applied to these people. The idea of compacting a sophisticated level of data into a very simple shape, not to mention all the scientific, psychological, and magical qualities associated with the shape itself, demonstrates a high level of cognitive processing. There was no need to create a complex narrative of images and words composed of highly accurate drawings of animals, humans, as well as other elements, such as we see in the caves at Lascaux in France. The simple shape containing a myriad of information, emotions, and ideas, which today we know as a logo, was already understood by our ancient ancestors. All the same amount of information could be retained by translation and recognition within a simplified graphic. Today we see this in the logos of corporations. However, it began in the Neolithic. The McDonald's logo, for example, tells us that a particular style and range of fast food is available below the arches and so on. The early artists of the Mesolithic ego had no choice but to create remarkably accurate and beautiful images of animals, people, and places on their cave walls, as they lacked the language of logos. The Neolithic artists had come to understand that they could compact all the same levels of information and data into lines, circles, and other shapes. In both cases, the obvious levels of cognitive sophistication, emotional and psychological communication was already apparent. It was as if the early artists and Magi of Europe had a rite ready-made. The complex and highly accurate cave art of the Mesolithic era compared to the simplified and basic pictographs of the Ogham script, which was developed thousands of years later. Yet both are equally complex, with the Ogham sigil containing as much and even more complex information within the simplified forms, which is then assembled into a completed message within the mind of those who can read the markings. Similar to how a corporate logo we are familiar with conveys to us the range and nature of their products. This transition from visual complexity to basic graphical shapes in order to convey a concept or complex message was highly developed among Neolithic rock artists, with simplified circles, dots, and wavy lines often charged by alignments with astronomical cycles and seasonal events. The complex imagery of the animals, people, and places being bound within specific symbols was within the level of cognition of the Neolithic people themselves, and not just on the walls of their underground chambers. All that was required to compress the same level of complexity of data contained within a simplified shape, and also to generate an emotionality relating to the actual shape, was to charge it, to infuse the rock art or sigil with a high level of cultural and emotional symbolic meaning into the consciousness of the community by illuminating it with the rays of the setting sun on a certain magical date. Ritual magic, by means of practice and theory, had been born. This in time would lead to the complexity of new forms of linguistic communication, and along with this, not only the birth of allegory and metaphor, but also the ability to charge these occult narratives within a mythology or legend. It also appears that humans became quickly mindful to the danger of everyone in a tribe or community being aware of this ability to create occult magic, and this led to the development of a class of initiates along with an elite priesthood class who would eventually congregate at geographically and spiritually strategic locations, such as Uisneach in Arland. Uisneach became the supernatural navel where the old kingdoms of Leinster, Munster, Connacht, Ulster, and Meath met at a single point. The first Beltane fire was lit there by the Nemedian druid named Mead, which was visible as far away as the hill of Tara, signifying the purification ritual of the island of Arland. Geoffrey on Monmouth stated that the stones of Stonehenge were brought to England from Uisneach by Merlin using the magical sciences of the Irish Druids. The still remaining large stone at Uisneach is a stone of the divisions and is considered to be a gateway to the other world. By then, a group of, or even just a single standing stone, told stories that were epic in proportion, as the landscape had been painted like a giant canvas from one part of Europe to the next, with megaliths and sacred sites. Uisneach itself is located on top of a long sloping hill surrounded by lowlands extending all the way to the river Shannon to the west and the coastal mountains and hills to the east. In a time before light pollution, a single fire lit at Uisneach would have been visible at night across a vast region of Ireland. One can only imagine how psychologically powerful the first sighting of this Beltane fire must have been to communities at that time, who would then light their own ritual corridor of fires for their livestock to be driven between the walls of flame so as to purify them as part of a chain reaction of Beltane fires which would be lit all over Ireland, literally within minutes of the first fire at Uisneach. The Four Treasures of Ireland. In terms of the general absence of magic and esoteric knowledge being applied to any serious study into Irish mythology to date, and what this might reveal in the broader context, we can compare symbolism and tropes across comparative cultures and later historical times as a useful pointer in this regard. As this is a book which utilizes both the framework of philosophy and magic in order to work our way through this remarkable detective story, we can begin with the magical and archetypal significance of the Four Treasures of Ireland. I believe that this generally misunderstood story is a vital clue to not only to how the Druidic supernatural worldview was expressed in Ireland and beyond, but also how this very ancient idea connected to the significance of the number 4 in both magic and symbolism offers up some very insightful information. Applying common magical ideas brings forth insights that would otherwise be lost in the miasma of more conservative speculation. Comparing symbolism brings us right back to the consciousness of the very ancient past, while also demonstrating a continuum from ancient Druidism and into the later Western magical tradition.